I want to thank this Montpelier Senior Activity Center for hosting this event. It's a part of the larger effort sponsored by Kellogg Hubbard Library, which is Poem City, which has posted the poems that were submitted last year to be posted around the city of Montpelier, but never were. And so those are the poems that are up and around. And if you live in the Montpelier area, please go visit and take a look at the poetry that's posted, plastered all over the town. It's also true that St. Johnsbury, Bradford, and Randolph all have Poem Town or Poem City-like events. And we want to acknowledge that their welcoming of poetry into their communities is much appreciated. So I'd like to start, and I'm just doing this for the first time, but I want to acknowledge that Vermont is founded on unceded Abenaki land. I believe that it's vitally important that all people understand that the land here that we love and come to think of as ours was stewarded by the Abenaki people for thousands of years before the arrival of Europeans. We can't tell the real stories of Vermont and our love for the land and our communities without acknowledging this basic fact of history. And I found this to be not something that's just an acknowledgement, but a part of the way I think about the poetry that I'm writing and the work that I'm doing. So this first poem called Wood Frogs is about a vernal pool. And I think it's partly about an area that has about a 50-year history in my consciousness. But I realize as I talk about the complexities of that 50-year history, that it has thousands of years of history as well, that I'm only on the surface of. So I want to acknowledge that as I read. Wood frogs. A cluck chucking creates its own syncopation down beyond the screen of pine, gray birch, and a rusting white delivery truck that sinks deeper each year in collapsing gravel. It once overlooked a horse riding ring that's now a marsh returning to a wood. A horse barn sits uphill, unused, sags a bit more every winter. A foolish venture failed that's strangely comforting. The rhythm of a slow, slow song resumed. A spring stream starts above our house, rests a few weeks here, sedges, saplings, lost leaves, covered in 2 feet of water. Wood frogs find it perfect for their use. We climb down to find the pool, glimpse water still enough to catch the light, step softly, see their bodies splayed, afloat, calling, waiting to engage their brief ecstatic violence. We pause, knowing how footfalls hush them into silence. Bodies green, surprising pink. We creep too close, a sudden flip and dive, shunned as though we were unwelcome wedding guests. Stillness is our way to hide. We freeze until they rise, resume their vernal dance. Our patience lets them pretend we're gone. We'll take that as something like acceptance. And then this winter, we got visited by a goshawk, first time ever in Susan's birding career and mine. This is called This and Beyond. The unexpected is unrelenting. Snow and -0 clamp midwinter in an iron rut. The goshawk we have never seen erupts into our ordinary. Slate blue wings, ferocious eye, black talons on jaunty yellow claws, severe white breast. Thrill of visitation from the murder god. Red squirrels vanish. 10 blue jays shriek, hopping limb to limb, self-righteous clerics announcing terror in the neighborhood they think they rule. And then a couple of short poems, one written this fall and then one this spring, last spring actually. This is called One Tree. Bare limbs reclaim the hills, resting till spring unsleeved. Will they then resume their great uplifting? One tall aspen still holds 10,000 leaves, a golden claim to permanence no one believes. The only dome of color left, my bleak heart rallies. Today, its subtle outrage claims our wintering valley. And then for spring, purple crocus. Mid-April, first beauty spent, crimped blooms prostrate on spring soil, darker than full bloom, like rippled silk, or eggplant baked until it slumps. The earliest whiten, exhausted, frail balloons collapse to earth. Such early death in unprized shades. And then a poem about, mostly about picking peonies, which will start soon, although it's hard to believe looking out there today. This is called Sit Here. A fine cable runs from peony petal to light fixture above the kitchen table. A spider smaller than a dewdrop drew it from herself. In her ascending dance, she's delicate, indifferent with assurance. I bring in blousy, boisterous blooms, knowing I bring the family too. Small ants scoot toward breadcrumbs on the cutting board. They and 6 earwigs swiftly set up shop. I quarrel only fitfully with them to stop. Creatures emerge for days. Buds surge open, shoulder into one another. Occupants visit bloom to bloom. Yellow spider quits the yellow peony, glows in a new magenta petal home. 2 days, one blossom or another tires, drops, deep coral petals, as though a child released them in oncoming sleep. Drifts pile on table, slip to chair, still more colors, tarnished, spill across the floor. Sunlight fills the kitchen, but keeps moving. Nothing stops, everything slows. Beauty slips out of nouns and adjectives, the vase, the sturdy shelf. It takes all my courage just to sit here with my less impatient self. And then finally, Osmore Pond, and then we'll hear from Dee Davis. Forests were toppled downhill to the mill that must have been here. The water worked the saw, wildness worked to houses. Now there's just a brimming beaver dam. Slabwood covered in 2 feet of water grows a fuzz of brown and green colonies that blur the lines a bit, but anyone who has sawn logs to even shapes will recognize it. Flat on one side, tree round, bark clad on the other. Soaked in slower time, slabs linger, shelter small fish, huge pollywogs with tiny feet. Sunken sawdust rotted into silt swirls up at our passing. We glide out of the present into a vast, whelming patience that with no will to humiliate, shocks our continuing unreadiness. The workshop where infinity tugs days and seasons into bodies, weaves its outlandish garments, disrobes, astonishes. We sit here beside our ordinary lives and watch, almost hear the silence of our absence. We paddle along the shore. 2 loons dive for bass among the branches of a fallen yellow birch. Pay us no attention. Thank you.
So I'm moved by a couple things, which has an influence on the music. I wanted to share after you read the poem about the goose hawk is that I saw my first bald eagle about an hour ago outside our picture, our west facing window on the neighbor's, perched on the neighbor's tree. Biggest bald eagle I've ever seen, being heckled and jeckled by a few crows. Didn't seem to care. And then it flew off. And then by the last poem with the theme of infinity, I'd like to play a piece called Homage. I wrote for my mother. It's the first selection on my album, Hopeful.
Thank you, Dee. I wanted to acknowledge that music and poetry are very lucrative forms of sustaining oneself. That's a joke. Also that my sister-in-law, Linda Sussman, is on, and she's a wonderful performer. Both Dee and Linda create amazing music, and it's out there for the public to hear, enjoy, and share. And I don't know how they get paid anything for what they do, because nobody has CD players anymore, or we could hardly find anybody who did. And I hope you'll find every way you can to support the musicians in their work and keep them alive and well so that they can continue to nourish us. So I just wanted to make that plug. And I think the information about where you can reach Dee's music will be put on the list. So I want to read a poem called Davy Road. This is about, again, thinking about living on the land and assuming that because one comes to the land and inhabits it, that we know it in a special way as ours, but also trying to understand the history of the land and the people who have been there before. A man in clothes the shape of sleep pushes his battered bicycle, wire baskets front and back, halfway up the drive and stops. He watches me raking gravel. You live here now? I pause, lean on my rake. I'm trying. We gossip like old neighbors. His family logged pine and maple, a few cows and chickens. Some summers a bear got all the corn. I tell him a bear got ours last summer. The house and barn were down there where you have your wood pile now. The house was small and cold as hell. The barn was better built. We go down, explore lilac, sprawling roses, honeysuckle, clumps of double daffodils, stacked granite slabs that held the barn. No sign of the house foundation. 5 generations in this place, and I 3 years. Twice since then, I've seen him picking up empties. Once, just his bike leaning against a tree. Then a little bit longer poem about Moose Bog. This was a birding trip that we took with some folks from the North Branch Nature Center. But it also brought me back to a place where my father had started preaching more than 50 years ago. The blue-headed vireo pokes its thread of song in and out among balsam buds, erupting like green caterpillars and the first red maple leaves. Each hop is unpredictable but decisive. Its body knows just how to stitch shafts of sun to recovering winter branches. We hope a spruce grouse will land on that rotting log, parade for us in the innocent glory that can make it easy prey for hunters. It never learns. Today, it doesn't come to our benign impatience. A black-backed woodpecker hammers and pries its way along a tilting spruce. We stopped in Island Pond for coffee, talked with a tired waitress, walked down gravel flecked with colored plastic, graded to the water. A loon patrolled, alert, aloof, chick nestled on its regal back. Another summer-only visitor, unfazed by cottages along the shore. This is where my father started preaching 60 years ago. He was laboring to find his voice and, as he could, to listen. The once thriving village was collapsing like a pumpkin in November. The forests all cut down, the Abenaki and the loggers gone. The trains still ran, but less often. More and more of them just passed through. Stores, churches, grayed out of their prosperity. Today, a band of Christians in plain dress, private, with a message that demands belief, runs most businesses in town. They have the energy that drove ambitious pioneers. Old timers here can't yet decide if that's hope or simply too much pride. At the rail yard, Western lumber wrapped in plastic weights transfer to become construction in some optimistic place. The forest recovers like a ravaged nation. No pulp mills left to use this spruce and fir. Some think backwater, some salvation. In the bog, pitcher plants sprout blood-red blossoms. Sundew closes on its insects, lip fingers clasped as though in prayer. In a beaver pond, dead trees stand sentinel. A pair of woodpeckers take turns disappearing in the farthest stem. No creature here is prospering or seeking righteousness, just doing what they can, the way they learned since the last glacier. White admirals are feeding in the puddles on the road, some broken, one wing to the ground as pickups pass. Gray jays hoarding, raucous, moose chomp lily pads, lynx come back for hares, and we come hungry from our ordinary lives. And then a couple of poems actually about North Danville, which is the farm we moved up to when I was a little boy and started dairy farming. This is called Lost in North Danville. I don't know where the meteorite is now, round, nubbled rock, flattened like a meadow muffin, iron heavy. It has resumed its ancient status as unowned. 50 years ago, we brought it home, our strange catch from an afternoon fishing Houghton Brook. Resting in clear water, we marveled it had hurtled through our air. A rusted pump handle sprouted from the same brook bed too. Iron wheel rims leaned against stone walls. Elements the same, but different. Both had been human tamed. The trout swam over it oblivious. It could have come eons ago, seared its way through a mile of ice, or found the pool last year, still ageless, wonderful. At the museum in town, the curator just laughed and gave no answer, did not trust our story. So common when the galaxy delivers us its weighty cosmic dust. I haven't searched for it. I don't want it rusting in the shed, shelved in that museum, or hammered on some anvil. Like other things, it is at home, lost there in North Danville. And then I used to get to go fishing when I was a farm boy. Our childhood brook crept through hummocked marshes, dove under canopies of roots, deepened by pasture boulders, thrilled me with speckled, many-colored trout. I captured their sleek, elusive bodies. Still, they flourished in that trickle almost to the first spring that welled up the liquid song of leaving. I knew every riffle, pool from that spring to the Burroughs Road, and for a few years, every change the seasons or the beaver wrought. At North Danville School, when we sang about the land of the free, this was what they meant. Hours to feel the water in my shoes, but home for chores by 3. And then a little different poem about climate change. It's hard to figure out how to write poetry that feels both honest as poetry and tries to make a political statement. This is my attempt. This is called Profligate. There's no easy way to say it. We are the ancestor who lives well beyond our means, but claims to have no choice. Debts accumulate, but habit drones like an old authoritative voice. So at the reading of the will, the children will get handed an impossible invoice. The doctors warn with increased urgency. Accountants offer growing evidence. Truth's opportunity is still deferred by storm clouds on an angry countenance. And at the end, we'll swear it wasn't clear, still passionately claiming innocence. It really is that simple and complex. We practice much less wisdom than denial. Dad yells at the table, mom won't answer. Pretend, put truth tellers on trial. Spending the children's vast inheritance seems unavoidable. Takes just a little while. And I think I'm going to stop there. And Dee, I was going to read one other poem, but I think I'm just going to pause here, if that's okay.
Well, that sounds great, because you moved me to do something different than what I was going to do.
Okay.
Yeah, hearing that last poem, I'm going to play actually, I'm going to make something up in the key of C, because I like to make it up as I go. And then I am going to actually play a classical piece from the mid-1800s by Johann Caspar Merz. It was written in the mid-1800s, and it's a nocturne. And I think why I was moved by the last poem is because there's light and dark in this piece. And I was moved by some of the darker things that came up in that last poem. Comes the dark part. Back to the light.
Thank you so much, Dee. So Dee, is that a classical piece that you use and then improvise on?
Yes, any classical piece I learn, I take full license of, because it was written in the 1800s. And so kind of like Bach, I'd say when I learn a classical piece, there's endless potential and possibilities before or after the piece, depending on what kind of mood I'm in.
That's great. I don't change my poems that much while I'm reading them, but occasionally I do slip in a new word or phrase or take something out.
It's exactly the same thing.
Well, I think you're a little more deft at doing it on the fly. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
So a third set of poems. This is the kind of thing that I don't know that this happens to women, but it certainly happens to men. This is about one of those horribly embarrassing things that wakes you up in the middle of the night when you're 76 years old, or maybe younger, and you think, oh my God, did I really do that? So this is called Talent Show. She played trumpet at a talent show in the church basement, badly, with enormous enthusiasm. We snickered with almost no restraint at the music and her enormous heaving 8th grade breasts. Fragments like this come flying at me like deadly pieces of space litter, still in orbit after all these years. And here I am in the small safety of my delicate identity capsule. She may be a grandmother by now. We might recognize each other in the checkout line at Shaw's. She'd ask in her husky voice about my sister and brothers. I'd tell her the usual something. Perhaps I could wait for her to go through the line, walk with her to the parking lot, ask about her life and listen. I've learned to do that. I suspect she'd forgive easily if I had the courage to ask. Or she might barely remember. For her, it was just another bunch of stupid boys acting like they did. Probably much worse happened. Yet here she is, listening to an old man explain what she's long understood. And this is for my mother-in-law, Wilma, at her retirement party. This party was something that she had looked forward to for a long time. There are racks of words ready cut for this occasion, a contagion of predictable emotions. So I enjoy the lady beside me snarling at her stuffed breast of chicken, grimacing with every sip of wine, drinking a second glass to the cold heart of management. My mother-in-law, the one retiring, the one who never thought she'd make it to this day, is in her element, queen for an evening. This banquet room, 2 doctors she knows better than they know themselves, and 50 working women, no one will steal her triumph. And this is called Chamois Shirt, and it's about, again, I don't know whether this is a male thing or not, but wearing something until it's well beyond respectable. For decades, I've had a shirt, actually a series of shirts, the color of late summer wheat, like our neighbor's golden retriever. Actually, a series of retrievers, each swiftly moves from dignified to comfortable and rarely goes to town. This Christmas, my daughter gave me another shirt which provoked the problem of infinity. That is, the time between the full use of one thing and the first use of the next. The old shirt you love, the other you may someday feel you own. I was resolute. The bleach stain, the expanding tear on the left sleeve, the seams undoing themselves gave excuse. I donned the thick new shirt, brought scissors to the old, and made small garden plots of cloth to clean the floor, wash windows, put polish on. But infinity is always there beneath, between us. Dogs wagging their delight, shirt after shirt, the wheat we wear, the wheat that will sustain us. Down on my knees, scrubbing today's soil from the floor. That cloth I use is soft, so thin, almost gone. And then this is sort of one of my pandemic poems. I haven't written a lot of pandemic poems, but this was after surgery about a year ago. It's called Touch. A week after surgery, midnight, I wake to feel your fingers lightly explore the remaining bandage, stitches almost healed, surrounding flesh, still swollen. All had been longing for that touch. Tender is the way you clean and dress the wound, but this is touch for its own sake. Who would think to ask for it? Who in the surgeries, the shelters, and the grief of our cruel streets dares say, just touch me? I think of all the things I don't deserve that bring me guilt, but this will never be among them. You could not remember doing it. You smiled, knowing I must have lain there, wishing it would never end. And then this is a poem for my aunt, Lucille, who passed away quietly and with immense power, clarity, and dignity. It's called Beluga for Lucille. On the drab March lawn, a length of blue plastic baling twine, beside it, a black 2-inch piece of flexible garden hose. These were the mouth and eye of the beluga whale we made from that last heavy gift of snow a month ago. The blue line as mouth, dark plastic eye, brought the snow to life as though the spirit of a whale might pay a 2-week visit. It was a hurried sculpture, improbably short, tail unbelievably raised up, and yet our yard assumed the welcome of an Arctic bay. This week, a ladybug has navigated bathroom counter and its articles with diligence before its spring departure. I watched the chickadee beside the red pole at our feeder, one with a map for staying, the other leaves tomorrow for the tundra. And my favorite aunt slipped off with ease and gratitude, as her husband gently said, to some other jurisdiction. And then on the ladybug theme, this is a poem called Getting Started. The ladybug paused on the kitchen table next to my Red Sox cap. Their shape the same. I placed the hat on it to check the fit. A minute later, lifted the hat carefully. The ladybug sat quite content. Roomy, they said, but otherwise a perfect fit. I think I'm ready now to get out and join the game. Okay, Dee.
Well, you know what that means, don't you?
You have lady.
I'm moved to do a ladybug waltz.
Okay. Thank you, Dee. I think all the ladybugs in the house are thrilled, and so are we. So, how many people on this call have ladybugs that are still in the house? Yeah, you can raise your hands. Yeah, there you go.
They never leave.
Okay. So I'm going to read, Dee, I said I was going to read one more, but I'm going to put in one other poem called Pine Knoll Nursing Home. This morning, strapped in the green vinyl chair, yelling at his absent son, tugging forward with instruction, crying, frustrated as a child. This afternoon, he lies in bed, exhausted. Land, cows, the business of the town, sometimes his children, defined for years by what he thought he could control, he gropes through dreams, stricken blind. One tiny vessel flooded like a stream in spring, and now so much worn out equipment left behind the barn, such clutter of indoor grief, he had assumed his wife was taking care of. So few come to see him. Those who do bring pity in a covered basket. His hand is like a polished sapling root that once clung fiercely to the soil. He rubs the tears filling his eyes. I touch the damp skin of his face. He says my name as a question. Tears begin again, knobs of joint and knuckle open. My fingers find the narrow welcome. It's time for sugaring, I say, forgetting that his body knows the seasons, even in this distant room. It ran all night, he says. Can't let it go to waste. Sap buckets overflow in fevered sleep, sweet water surging from the ground. His fingers flutter, repeating work already done, as though familiar urgencies could teach the work he never got around to. And then finally, Lake Elmore. Lots of lake and water poems, aren't there? Lake Elmore, October 1st. Curled beige feathers, downy at the base, litter the stream that wanders toward us and Elmore's lake. Beavered alder branches, submerged pond hair cushions, duckweed corralled by viburnum roots, all strewn as though by a gentle pillow fight. We paddle past managed shorelines with tidy cottages to this neighborhood of lily pads and pickerel weed hidden from their sight. More happens here, like the church basement daycare center, chorused with children, always cluttered, doing a better business than the church. This is the water's sweet meander, slow channel where merganser mallard grew. It's also where the storm flood races through. My grandson cried when he gave up his first and favorite bike, the one he trusted enough to let his feet release the ground. I had to argue with myself against the urge to dry his eyes, hurry him along, stop, honor that lonely keening sound. Two young ducks try to keep one bend upstream from us. Trapped by our invasion, they finally stop. One leaps to flight. The other hides behind marsh grass in a small alder pocket. We paddle by, eyes averted, our small courtesy. It quivers as we pass. 6 summer weeks, this was their home. Now they leave for something new. I think detachment, that's illusion too. In the next pool, a heron rises, scarecrow taking flight. We look for it at every bend, plying its silent heron tricks again. But a beaver pond opens before us, flood at eye level, no heron, but wide water seeping through 1,000 sticks. This summer, we went up 5 streams. The beaver, dogged Calvinists, seemed to insist it's effort, not the dam, that's permanent. We postpone leaving, poke up every bulrush alley, give in at last, turn, stroke hard across the open reach, land on the expanse of beach. Women in bright saris watch their boisterous men play tag, joined by the youngest daughter. We greet them, lift the boat, leave our visit in the water.
I'd like to conclude with a couple excerpts from a longer piece called Condor Suite. I think it's the 4th selection on the album Hopeful. I feel like it goes very well with Scudder's last poem that he just read.
Thank you, Dee. And thank you to everyone. I think we're just about on time. And I want to thank you all. I wish you a safe transition, I hope, out of the COVID era. I think we're making progress, but it seems fitful and uncertain. And figuring out how to be safe and how to be respectful is a difficult challenge for all of us and for our society as well. So I really want to just thank you all for coming, for being part of this, and for sharing the time with Dee and me. And I really appreciate the chance to see all of you, many of you from other parts of my life and history. So thank you for being here. And I wish you health and safety and a good spring and summer. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks again to Montpelier Senior Activity Center and to Andrew. Thanks for this. Andrew, this is going to be posted by MSAC, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get a recording of this out. We can send that to everyone who registered, and you can feel free to distribute it. I also put in the chat links to both the works of Scudder Parker and Dee Davis, and you're welcome to explore those fantastic works on your own. And thank you so much to both Scudder and Dee for this amazing last hour. It was fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks. And Susan wants to say hi.
No, just saying hi to everybody.